How many
Well-
others, how many others do you think might join in?
Don't know. Let's see. Heather's away. No, I don't know. No, Heather might. I think we should probably begin.
Okay, you're all
Judith
set.
away.
You can do it now because I got your recording going, so you're all set.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right. Okay, I guess we should call it. Wow, Paul made it. Wow.
Well, I'm on my phone, so this is kind of strange. So I'm at a job site, so.
Well, welcome. Excellent. Shall we, Carol, Wardell, would you like to call the attendees to, I could call a roll, or can you do it digitally?
I can rattle off who's actually in attendance. It is 4:03 PM. This is the Wilbur Woods Stakeholders Committee meeting. This is also December 22nd, and members in attendance are Robert Mara, Jason Burchard, Sue Terrio, Antonio Texera, John Gwynn, Carol Trocchi, Paul Golembeski, and Chief Rains.
Excellent. Has anybody had a chance to look at the minutes, and would anybody like to make any changes to the minutes of Tuesday, November 17th? It's quite a long discussion.
If nobody has any changes or things they want to modifiers they want to make, I'll move that we accept the minutes as written.
Okay, are there any
Second.
seconders?
I'll second.
Okay, good. Is there any objection to all ayes? Guess the ayes have it. Okay, we'll dive into the agenda. All right, that's easy. We had a letter from a friend of the stakeholders, somebody who we all respect, querying whether restoring the bridges was the correct pathway, or whether the restoration will create an attractive nuisance in town, as we've been seeing recently at Lloyd's Beach and Town Beach, and lead to overuse. We had voted to go right ahead and restore the bridges, but I thought it made sense to based on sort of the COVID problems we've had this year and so on, to maybe we should discuss that one more time and make sure we were barking up the right dogwood, as they say. So anyway, I'm glad somebody thought that was funny. Anyway, so are we going to create an attractive nuisance with restoring those bridges and so on? I'd like to open it to discussion. Any thoughts?
Well, let me try to summarize, I think, what the options are. We always have the option to just leave it the way it is, right?
Yep.
Second is, if you restore the bridges so that people can do a drive-through and not have lots of parking, that's an option. The other option is to restore the bridges for vehicles, but just to restore them for walkers. So you have two walking bridges, but then you'll need space for some limited parking. So I think those are the options. We either have two pedestrian bridges and a little parking, because you can't have pedestrians without some parking for them, or else you have even more limited parking and have it be like it mostly was in the past, a drive-through.
I think there's one option to add to that, Rob, which is that in the do nothing option, I think we still need to address the fact that there needs to be sound vehicular access for maintenance and emergency services, whether it's freely available or not. We still have something to do to restore the bridge that is about to cave in so that we could get a truck across it or equipment across it. I think that probably should be one of, something on your list, even if we don't make it accessible for vehicles to drive through on a regular basis. it probably makes sense to do something to improve the situation that's there now.
And this is John. I sort of think that if we were just to restore one vehicular bridge and let everyone go on it, it would create two-way parking, and I think that would be a real mess. Would be violating the ordinance that we're just requesting. Would be driving ourselves off the road to try to let another car pass in the opposite direction. So I think if we can afford it, two vehicles, if we go that route, two vehicle option, I think is vehicular bridge option would be the only route.
And with limited parking, then it limits the use of the, of the woods. So the only time I think it was really heavily used was when a group of friends of ours had a winter solstice party, which would have been tonight or tomorrow night. But that was the maximum, maybe 15, 20 cars. So, and there's no real, I didn't really see in the past much more than that as the peak of people using it. Most people would drive in, look around, drive out, sometimes park and walk around a little, but I think that would be fine. But I also think if you just had a little parking area and people could park and walk around, that would be fine. I mean, those two options seem to be fine.
Well, it sounds like the thing that's going to limit overuse is parking, right?
Correct.
Because you just can't get that many people in there. And we can't expand the parking. Carol Trokey, am I correct? Because it's all wetlands.
Yeah, I think the risk is.
Oh, Jason, did you have a comment?
I did. I was wondering if the chief might have any insight into how often vehicles either need to be towed or go too far off the road in a swampy area, or whether how often that might become an issue in Wilbour Woods. Just wondering, without some sort of parking, they're not gonna get bogged down if they have a really low vehicle.
Right. So since I've been here, the little over a year and a half, we haven't had to tow any vehicles out of Wilbour Woods.
All right, great.
My thoughts are that I'm in a lot of different directions with this. I'll give you my thoughts on what I think we should do. I think we should make pedestrian bridges and leave the parking, or whatever we call the parking, as is. People move into, they come off a swamp road and they find a spot right there and they walk around and sightsee and take in nature, and then they head back out. The only access we truly need in there, from an emergency standpoint, we kind of treat it like most areas, or a lot of areas in Little Compton, where as long as we can get the quad, the police department's quad or the fire department's quad, into an area, we're usually pretty good for an EMS call. Now, if there's a fire or something different, that's not my cup of tea, and that's something we'd have to talk to Chief Petron about. What kind of means or ways do we get certain pieces of apparatus in there? Now, they have the forest fire truck, which is it's not as big as most fire trucks, kind of looks like a military Humvee. If we use possibly, that size vehicle, and we make it only accessible to emergency vehicles, we make a big enough bridge, but we tell people you can't drive over it. I think you alleviate the need. There'll definitely be some parking issues if you let people drive around in there. You'll get people driving in the wrong direction, regardless of which way you tell them is the correct direction. People are going to try to move over, and they're going to end up in a ditch. I think that's going to happen on a regular basis. And not only are we going to have to tow a lot of cars out of there, you're going to do a lot of damage to the edges of the roadway. So there's a lot of kind of things to think about. From my point of view, if we can get the quads in there we can handle most EMS emergencies.
Jason, what about your thoughts? Because you have to do tree takedown and work
Well,
That's another
and the
point.
town.
I mean, we can climb anything back there that we need to. It's just a matter of getting the wood out. So, I mean, that, you know, therein lies the problem. But if there is one bridge that's for emergency vehicles, that becomes a pedestrian bridge, I mean, why build two bridges, I guess, if we only need to build one, if there is going to be no traffic back there. But I mean, we can still do what we need to do. The complication comes in with the wood.
If
If I could ask, getting back to the idea of one bridge that a quad could make its way over, how would that work in terms of keeping regular traffic off of it? Right now, we have giant boulders in the way. Obviously, you wouldn't make that as your approach, because if there's an emergency, you don't have time to move the boulders. So how would you have a bridge that could handle a quad, but would somehow be closed off to other vehicle traffic? Like, what would that look like, I guess?
I think you just simply use signage.
Well,
And,
Narrow.
I think people being people and who they are, you'd have to use the G word, which people don't like to hear in Little Compton, a gate or something on
Don't stop
the
that again,
entrance,
please.
on the entrance to the bridges themselves. I'm not opposed to both bridges going in, but I like the idea of they're for emergency use or maintenance use only. That would make sense, but I'm leery on how we're going to approach it. Are we gonna like the original vote was to go for an RFP for both bridges, and then if we're gonna put two bridges in, then immediately we're gonna restrict access to the bridges. I don't want to appear deceptive in our RFP. You know, should we modify an RFP to say it's for maintenance and EMS work only, or do we leave it as is and then just do some kind of gate to answer Sue's question? Somehow limit a way, like maybe a gate that has a gap in the middle that you can walk through to get over the bridge, but you swing the two sides open to get through with a vehicle for maintenance or EMS.
Paul, they also have those, I've seen them in the state parks, where there's a wide bridge, but which they use for pedestrian bridge, and there's just a pole dead set in the middle of it, and with a pin with a lock on it.
Oh, there you go.
Quick unlock the pin, pull the pin, up comes the pole. You just drop the pole to the side, and basically you can drive right over it.
So I asked the question not so much because I'm in favor of the concept. It's more that I was just wondering how it would work. I mean, I'm still in favor of restoring the two car bridges so that you could have people slow drive and take in the scenic view. Again, making Wilbour Woods accessible to people who can't walk or bike the loop, because I think that's an important part of Wilbour Woods. I also think that with this other plan that we're discussing, you then really make it difficult for the grill sites to be used. And that's not something I've personally taken advantage of, but I know other people do. And it's one of the appeals of the woods. So, and I also feel like Jason's point of he can do tree work in there, but obviously has difficulty getting the wood out. I think that's an important point, because when you go through now and you see the wood, you see sort of the presence of man. Like, we've had to go in, we've had to cut the wood, and there it lays. It takes away from the natural feel of the woods. It would be nice if that kind of thing could be removed. So I'm in favor of staying the course. I totally understand this idea of the attractive nuisance. I remember what the town was like 20, 25 years ago and how it feels now. But I feel like we also want to keep the woods nice for the townspeople too. It's not just about making something that might attract other visitors. And I really, when we had the two working bridges, which went on for years and years,
Yeah.
the road was used intermittently. I don't think there was a major problem with two cars coming together at one time, because I feel like it's like a trickle. Cars go in, they come out. It trickles throughout the day. I don't see these giant traffic jams of cars coming in either direction. So I'm in favor of staying the course.
And we can always put a one-way sign on it too. We can always do a loop that requesting people to take a right at the first intersection. If we go that way.
In response to Sue's comments, two things. I've seen since we've been down to just the one pedestrian bridge with the other bridge closed, I've seen a lot of families and people using the grills and picnic areas. The two at the ends you can park close to. The one, with the big fire pit. I've seen families that have been using it like consistently, the same families on Sunday afternoons or on a regular schedule. And they've just started bringing wagons. They bring a wagon, they load up their cooler, they park by the end of the road and take it over the bridge that way. So I think people will find ways to do what they want to do. To Sue's other point, in my years in Wilbour Woods, I've also seen very limited vehicular traffic. Either people who have a vehicle that can handle it and wish to go around the loop. More often than not, it's people that when there were two bridges, were unaware of what they were driving into. They were just sort of following a road, and then they would get part way around and stop me as I was walking and say, "What have we done? Can we get out of here if we keep going? Like, we're not sure what's going on. We're going over these potholes." So I don't know how many people actually want to drive around the loop and how many people just do because it hasn't been clear what they're getting into. At this point, there's never been signage or any indication of what you can and can't do and where it goes and, what you're getting into when you drive over one of the bridges. So I don't know. I think either way is very doable and manageable. And maybe we just need to be a little bit clearer as to how we direct people to what we wish they were doing.
I think the direction years ago were the signs that were on the trees. You came in, you saw a sign, you looked at that sign, it wasn't pointing to the right, it was pointing towards the left, and you followed the 12 or 13 signs that we had there. I don't think we need the signs again, but if you came in and there was an arrow pointing on a rock going to the left, you'd make the circle the correct way. Without having a vehicle access, I think it's limiting the use of Wilbour Woods for older people.
It also, if we put all the parking on the south side of the Dundry Brook, we probably, what do we have, room for 8 cars, maybe something like that? And more people can from town and maybe from somewhere else would use the woods if we had more parking. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't have. Maybe the number of cars, spots available doesn't really pertain to use. I don't know.
I've not noticed parking to be very often an issue. I know if I drive in there and all the spots that feel safe to park a normal low clearance car are taken, then I know the woods is going to be more crowded than I will enjoy, and I come back or go somewhere else. People do park when there were 2 bridges. People will park by the fire pit, the largest picnic area, and you can put a bunch of cars there if you plan it, because there's the turnaround by the pond. I am someone who took advantage during my grandmother and my dad's later years in driving around the loop because it was a way to take an elderly person, to have them have that experience if they couldn't walk the whole thing. So I totally kind of hear that. Even if we do restore 2 bridges, the roadway is currently in such bad shape that if you have someone who isn't capable of walking, you don't really want them riding back there either. So that's something, if that's a big value the community has, I think we'd have to also think about what we do with the road.
Yeah, and if we just have pedestrian bridges only, we won't be able to fix the road on the inner loop. If that needs gravel and so on, we won't be able to.
But going back to Chief Rain's comment, I think we can have the best of both worlds there. If for some reason we needed to limit it to foot traffic because of a time of year or whatever we were doing, we could put the poles in the bridge or just leave the poles out and leave it open to vehicle traffic. I think getting both bridges is key, and then dealing with if there's a traffic problem, we could deal with it with the post later on. It's nothing we have to do right away. And maybe the post will never go in. Maybe it's never going to be a problem. Chief, what do you do at night? Don't you go do a loop in there at night? Well, now you can't loop, but didn't you have to do a loop in there at night when both bridges were up, or is that before your time?
That was before my time, but I have heard that they did that. They took a loop around, but I'm not sure that they always took a loop around. I'm sure they just went in basically to the parking area, which is what we do now, and just make sure there's no one sitting in there needing any assistance. Just a couple, 2-3 times a night, do a quick, we'll put them under our business checks.
Paul, to follow your argument, if we were to fix both bridges as vehicular bridges, we could install sleeves in them when we built them, and we could add add poles later if it starts to become a problem. That way, more people could use that. More people from town could use. They could spread out, use the fire areas. I don't know. This is an interesting idea.
Well, it just gives us what we've already basically voted on is let's go for an RFP to replace both bridges, and let's look at an option to put a sleeve in there to put a pipe if it becomes necessary. It might never become necessary.
So could you just tell me what a sleeve is?
Think of a smaller pipe that fits just inside a larger pipe. The larger pipe would be the sleeve.
Okay. So you put like the sleeve in the ground so that you can later stick it in there. Okay.
Right.
An empty cylinder.
You put it in just before the bridge, just so a car can't sneak around it or anything like that. And you can drive over it, you can walk over it. It doesn't need to be much. It's probably maybe a 2-inch diameter pipe. That's all you're going to need.
And the maintenance vehicles and fire and police would have a key to the lock that goes on it.
Yeah, and again, the sleeves can be something we can install after the fact, because you don't have to do it during what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And it might not ever be an issue. It might not ever come up. I mean, if there's a reason to block off the bridges, we could just put sawhorses up and say, hey, you can't go in today because the garden club's back there planting and we don't want anybody racing back there when they're doing their work. Something to that effect. But a sleeve would be nice to just be able to pop a pipe in, something you can walk over, something's there.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
You're talking about replacing the bridges for vehicular traffic. But then I hear you saying that the roadway is in pretty precarious condition. Can the roadway handle vehicular traffic now? And if not, what will happen when that uptick happens of those vehicles going over that road? Are you going to cause, say, a liability issue if you don't also fix the roads?
Yeah, we have to fix the road. That's
right.
That was one of the discussions about when we replace the bridges. We can get maintenance vehicles over to fix all the potholes and regrade the road.
Well, there are 2 road issues, I think. One is just to the right. As soon as you come into Wilbur's Woods and take a right, the road is falling into the stream. That's one issue. The other is just general, and that's sort of a dangerous condition, I think. In fact, it may have eroded last week, so I haven't been in there. But the other issue is just maintenance of the road around the loop and so on, just so people don't trip and so on. We've kind of enjoyed having potholes there, but there are potholes and deeper potholes. I always think that the potholes along the front will keep out anybody that has never been to Wilbur's Woods before. So I've sort of always thought that maybe the potholes in the front are okay, but they're not such a dangerous situation as along the side of the stream where the road is falling in. When you drive by, your tires are 12 inches away from falling into the stream.
I think Brett wants to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Johnny, I thought that the restoration of the roadway where there's that outflow or inflow pipe just to the right of the entrance, I thought that was going to be part of the RFP.
Oh, as the draft for the RFP is written, it is part of it.
Yeah.
A dangerous situation. And the draft currently calls for repairing that.
Yes.
And that, or at least giving us ideas for how to repair it. And the other is to restore the two bridges to vehicular. That's the current draft of the RFP, but of course we can change that.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure that my understanding was right. Was that the hydrological issues are all going to be part of the RFP?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Carol Trokey was in there this week right after the 3-inch storm and had some sort of sobering photographs of, Dundry Brook was really swollen, and it was really an aggressive force, and make me wonder if we're doing that, even if we do the right thing, whether we're going to be washed out. But I think that's the reason to getting an engineer in. I think we're going to need to do at least, it sounds like we're going to, maybe we do, even if we have to do one maintenance bridge that's closed off, we still have to deal with, the force of the water, and the ground wasn't even that frozen. If we have it really frozen and more storms, it's going to be quite a hydrological force. What, Carol?
It's important to keep in mind that was a big rainstorm, but it was coming on the tail end of a significant drought. So we're going to get more and more storms of that size, and they may come in March. I've seen it more flooded in Wilbour Woods for sure in the last few years than the photos from the storm that I just sent. So I think whatever we do, we need to make sure we're planning for the fact that that's going to be happening more and more frequently.
The existing bridge that's still intact and in need of repair, I guess we'll call that what the southern or the southeastern bridge. That sits right on the edge of the floodplain in that stream, and I've seen it over the years. I've seen that bridge literally be underwater. It gets that bad sometimes. So that's why an engineer is necessary. We need something that's going to survive.
I think so too.
Well, I was wondering if everybody's gotten a chance to see what Kevin Wilkie put in down at the south end of Long Highway.
Yes.
The solid concrete block, which looks quite durable. And really, while it is concrete, I've already noticed in the time that it's been there that the concrete is starting to age, and it doesn't look like it just came off the shelf. And certainly looks solid. So I just wanted to see what people thought about the way it looked.
I talked to the guy that put it in, the owner of the property, and he said he'd give us the name of the or give our engineer, if we go that far, the name of the company that does the precast concrete beams over the top. I think we could probably do a better, I think we could probably disguise the bottom a little bit better than that bridge, which is, you know, very straight concrete, but I'm sure it's aging fast. But I think we can do a little bit. I think the Garden Club and Company was really hoping that we have a more rustic bottom to it. But I think we can use the technology. If we get to the stage, I think we can use that modern technology, but also make it look like an old bridge as well. So I'm feeling pretty confident about that. But we definitely
absolutely
something solid.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I think it's to some extent, I mean, we're going to be a slave to DOT standards no matter what. So,
exactly.
But I just, you know, after seeing it and watching it, it's already aged a little bit. It's not awful to look at.
Doesn't take long for mildew and mold to grow in Little Compton. So
not in this town.
Particularly in a highly humid, in a sweatland,
The petri dish of Little Compton.
Yeah,
that's right.
I think Paul's absolutely right. Whether we have a pedestrian way or vehicle way, the road needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we're not going to be able to get anyone in there.
Yeah, it's not even walkables in spots.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to get accused of the bridge to nowhere.
Exactly. Well, what are we thinking?
But me personally, just my opinion is I think we go forward with the RFP for the 2 bridges and the repair of the road like we originally discussed in the draft. I think we should go forward with that. And I think anything that becomes pedestrianish, so to speak, we could do after the fact without any big deal. Maintenance department could probably put it in. It wouldn't be a big deal.
I sort of like the idea that if we do that route, we can just put the bollards, the pipes in, and we can restrict the visitation to the front where there's only parking for 8 cars if we want. It gives us options down the road. In theory, the COVID years are going to be over. So with vaccines, so maybe we won't have quite as much pressure.
Or a lot fewer people around.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll have more pressure, but we have an option, so I think. Rob, what's your thought about
I'd say put the vehicle bridges in, and if it's a problem, then you can always put the sleeve in. Gives you the most options that way. If you restrict it just to pedestrian bridges, then we'll always have pedestrian bridges, and you'll have problems you'll have to have a special vehicle to go in to get wood out and all that stuff. And if not, then you're basically building a vehicle bridge.
Jason, what's your thought? I'm going down through I'm calling everybody.
My thought is exactly the same. I'm absolutely for 2 bridges and redoing the roads. I think to do anything less is not restoration.
Okay. Carol, what's your thought? Carol Trokey, Carol Lynn.
I'm not necessarily in favor of roads through wetlands, but this has been a long-standing pre-existing one. I think it's used and appreciated by the community. I think, like you've all said, we can build it and then respond to management as problems arise or if concerns come up. I also think that there's going to be a point where if we don't maintain the road, we'll lose the ability to maintain it on the backside. Now, you could have different opinions about that, but I mean, it's here now. I think we have a responsibility to manage it appropriately, or else proactively agree that we're going to give it up in the future, which I don't think anybody wants to see happen. So
if I could just jump in and add to that, Carol's absolutely correct. And the Ponderosa is a classic example of that. Manny Pete used to go in every so many years, open a sluice gate, let it dry out, go in with his bulldozer, clean it out and put it up. SBA took it over, and we brought it up years ago about going in there and doing it again. And their exact words were, well, if you've been doing it all along, you could continue to do it. But since you've stopped, now you've got to do this whole permitting process, and it's a wetland. And I don't know, it was otters or muskrats that built houses, and it just, it went downhill, and basically it got too cost prohibitive to do it.
Yeah, well, we may face that, but
Well,
anybody,
and there's also the deed. The deed says if we don't maintain it, it
Yep.
returns back to the descendants of Elizabeth Lloyd. Now that's been a vague what maintaining it means, but if we go forward with this, we're definitely doing the maintaining thing.
yeah. Brett, what's your thought about bridge, pedestrian, vehicular?
I think that the restoration to, as I think Carol's point about being able to take her parent, was it your parents, Carol, that you mentioned? Being able to take her parents through was important. I think that's been important to a lot of people. I also think, as Paul has said, if we don't get back to the road, we're probably going to lose the road and may not ever have it back. And I like the idea that it's a unique, one of those odd, strange places where you can actually drive through a wetland. And as somebody had said in one of our earlier meetings, it's one of the few parks where that's allowed. So I think that restoring the two bridges, I think the notion of being able to, that we can control vehicular traffic if it becomes a management issue. I think that's something that we could certainly do, and I think that's an easy one. I think that we could go to something similar to what they do at South Shore Beach for the fire pits if we want to, if it gets to be, people can reserve the picnic spots there and things like that. And I think that but having the two bridges, I think and particularly restoring the hydrology. I think getting a good handle on the hydrology is going to be important, and getting something that's stable now, because as Carol hinted, we're not quite sure what's going to happen in the near future. So it's getting closer.
Yeah.
So I would like to see both bridges.
Sue, do you have any, would you
Yeah.
like to chime in about whether we have two bridges and what's your thinking? Have we changed your mind or not, or what?
My thought after listening to everyone is that if you did want to make it where it's two pedestrian bridges, then I feel like that's what you should do from the start. I feel like it should be two car bridges for reasons that I've stated previously. I'm also not for adding any kind of parking. And I want to keep it looking as natural as possible. So this idea of maybe posts standing up in front of the bridges and all makes me a little nervous. So I'm for the two bridges, as I've given my reasons before. But if for some reason the committee wants to go the pedestrian route, then I feel like do it from the start. Like, don't spend the money to put in two car bridges and then decide let's make them pedestrian. That was my thought after hearing everyone. So
It's an expensive option. Tony, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I can. I would say that as you have written the proposal, I would keep as is. Then you can always scale it back. I mean, there's some factors that will weigh in eventually. Will be the cost, and certainly that could be a determining factor as to how we proceed, with that as well. So I would say, just keep it. Then you can scale it back. Again, depending on funding, or if things change, if people change their minds afterwards, they can be handled at that time.
Chief Rains, what are you were advocating just pedestrian? Do you have any problems with our going ahead with the two vehicular bridges with option of being able to put the posts in if we need to?
No, after listening to everybody's, thoughts and the history behind, Wilbour Woods, two vehicular bridges is fine. We will deal with whatever comes up. in Wilbur Woods from a, a fire or police point of view, when it does, just like we do with the rest of the town. So either way is fine.
Yep. Well, everybody's been talking. I've been really thinking like what my thoughts are about, which I think it's really important to get as many people as we can outside. Our kids in town, particularly, I'm thinking about people in town. I think it's a really important thing, and I think that reducing the number of people that can use, of people in town who can use Wilbur's Woods, just seems counterintuitive to trying to get kids outside and using campfires and things like that if it's harder. So I had a couple of sleepless nights thanks to that, but to the person who sent us a letter, who I think had a lot of thought, but I think we're able to do it and keep it. I think the thing that's going to limit the overuse is just that there's so few parking areas. You can't have a lot of people in there. So I think we're in a safer. I don't think we have the headaches of Lloyd's Beach and the town beach, because I think it's going to be I think we can control the numbers of vehicles just by the parking. So, and we can do it with or without the posts. And so I don't know. I'm thinking we're maybe, after rethinking it and going back, but I think I'm going back and thinking we were doing the right thing to have the two bridges. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but oh well. We may not be able to afford it too. That's another issue.
Well, I think the saving grace is you're restoring what was there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think restoring what was there. I think that's okay. So I don't know. So should we, and we've already voted to do that. Should we vote again?
You don't need to.
Don't need to?
No.
All right. Well, okay. I guess we'll keep going. And so Carol, Carol Waddell, will you and Tony be able to get our RFP to the next town council meeting to give approval to put it out to bid?
Yes.
When would that meeting be? Which meeting would that be?
Well, our next meeting is January 7th.
Okay. Do I need to send you a letter to request it to go on that meeting?
It would be a good idea if it came from you.
Okay, I'll send you that tomorrow. Okay, good. And then we would probably open the bids on the 4th of February, if that's a meeting date?
Yes.
Okay,
And then what would likely happen is the council will then take a vote to accept them and refer to your committee for review.
okay,
Or reject them, depending on what kind of format they come in.
okay. All right, good. All right, guess we'll do that. I know many of us on the committee are nervous about taking government funds that would open the would restrict the ability to keep this mostly to Little Compton residents, although I think nobody wants to have to actually police it. I wonder if anybody knows about Champlain Foundation funds. Do they have, do they pay for engineering? Would they do a match for engineering? And B, do you think they would have that restrictions if it's open? If we clearly in a proposal said we're trying to open it to all the residents of the town? Does anybody have any experience with them?
I'm not sure of the restrictions with Chaplin. It's a private foundation, so I imagine they can say what they want. They can say, no, we don't agree with that. Or yeah, we do. I think that's a question you have to ask them. I know they give money to the libraries. And I don't think there's any strings attached to it.
Before this meeting, I tried to reach them, but their phones have been busy the whole time. So I was going to fire these questions. I don't know if they'd even pay for, but I think it would be, I wouldn't mind having some matching funds in our pocket for engineering costs, so we can move that along, because we already have the 12,005. So guess I have a hole in my pocket, want to spend it. But well, I don't know. If we can catch up, if anybody knows that has any, if they'll let us have it mostly for town residents or primarily for town residents, we'll explore that. I think they have a February 15th.
Brett has his hand up.
Yeah, Brett does. I was waiting for a break.
Brett?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, my experience with Champlain has only been with cultural institutions. So I'm not sure what their funding here is like, but they've generally been, and it's generally been for so it's certainly something worth pursuing.
One of their wings only gives money to capital projects and restoration in Rhode Island.
Yes.
So I think they would be a good one if they would be,
yes,
with your permission, with everybody's permission. If I have to get a grant request in, do we have to wait for the next meeting for approval of that, or do I have can I send that in by circulating it? Can we?
Just a quick look at the Champlain website, under what they fund for conservation and parks. It does make it clear that they don't fund municipal parks, but will work through a 501c3 that's like a friends group. So I'm not sure that they would give money directly to the town. I'm sure there are ways we could work around that, but it might take a little time to figure out what that would look like.
Yeah,
How about the John and Letitia Carter Foundation? I mean, John and Letitia they were long-term residents of Little Compton, and they have a fairly large foundation by Rhode Island standards. And it's now run, I believe, by their son. We probably should have a conversation, John, with Marjorie O'Toole.
Okay.
John, you could maybe reach out to John Berg too on the Nature Conservancy. Not necessarily they would donate, but they might have revenue stream somewhere else that we could access.
Okay. They're usually hitting us up for money, but okay, let's try it.
Well,
Yeah, why not? I think the Carter sounds like a really good one, because Letitia Carter is abutting, her land, I think, abuts Wilbur's.
It does.
So that's an interesting one. All
right.
right.
I believe the son runs the foundation now.
Okay. Yeah, I've met John Carter. He seems like a nice person. Yeah, he lives on Taylor's Lane South, I think. All right. Okay.
John?
Yep.
Tony. When it comes to engineering, I don't think you're going to get any grants that will pay for engineering. They will pay for the project once it's shovel ready. So in terms of the engineering, I think that would be covered by the present funds, the funds that we currently have. So, I mean, certainly you're all more than glad to pursue those avenues, but I don't think any of them will pay for engineering. They will pay once you have a shovel-ready project, and then you're looking for the funds to really support that.
If we have, Tony, 12,005 in that, in our war chest at the moment, and the lowest bid that we qualified bid comes in at 18,000, for instance, will the town let us sign a contract to go through the first 2 or 3 phases of a contract and get money later?
Well, the engineering for that, I don't think it's going to go above 10. That's my take. Okay.
Wonderful.
However, okay, we don't want to keep mentioning the amount.
Yes, please stop bringing up how much it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we really don't want to put, on the table. Don't show your cards at this point.
Okay, we have 3,000 in the Okay, well, we'll say we have 3,000 in the budget.
No, I would just say, let's go for the engineering, and
All right.
we'll see how it plays out.
Okay. But you think that we would be able to, since we're going to have phases, a concept phase, a design phase, supervision phase, bidding, et cetera, we would be able to get the engineer going even, well, if it's only $10,000, we're fine. So, all right, good. Well, let's.
I mean, that's just my take, from the amount of work that it's been discussed. Yeah, I mean, look, town landing was about 6,500, okay? And until quite a bit of work there that it need to be done. Here, you're talking about 2 bridges and so forth. But anyway, the scope of work here, I don't think it'll go as high as the
Excellent.
intention originally.
Okay, good. All right.
The other thing, John, is we can reach out to the local engineers because sometimes they'll actually donate some of their expertise because it's a town project and it's for the public.
Okay, good. I look forward to that. All right, excellent. Jason is dubious, I can tell, but anyway, but that's good. All right, next item on the agenda. Does anybody else have any comments about that? All right, next item, I don't know if we're gonna have much time to talk about, Carol and Jason, do you want to sort of start the discussions about a habitat management section of the maintenance plan, invasive plants and forest regeneration ideas?
Well, basically, when the existing management plan was done, which was, 10 plus years ago, with very fresh eyes, not being very familiar with town or knowing the property as well. But one of the things that was done at that time was just sort of delineating the area that had been altered. So the area that Public Works had been regularly clearing and trying to put a limit on that so that, there's some responsibility that's been done in the past to manage and continue, or at least shape those areas, while also trying to preserve the natural features of as much of the rest of the property as possible. So my concerns, there's a pretty significant cleared area mostly confined to the center of the roadway, closest along the Dundry Brook itself. I think paying attention to that, we know that we've been seeing an increase in multiflora rose coming in along the roadway. After that conversation, whenever we started a year or two ago, Curtis and his staff has done a great job of sort of staying on top of that. So I think if we keep up that pressure, we should be able to kind of stay ahead of that one, which is great. But I would say the other concern, particularly in the human altered area, is the degree to which we're going to get any sort of forest regeneration. So the understory has been cleared. And in most cases, it appears that that clearing sort of favored certain things, left most of the hollies, left some other desirable species, whatever the rationale was, we sort of are where we are. But as we lose trees, or some of the trees being in bad shape, Jason had to go in and do a lot of work because they were hazard trees, things that were going to be dangerous. I'm not sure there's much coming up. So I think that area in the long term is going to essentially end up being more and more open if we don't make some changes there. And more open in this day and age frequently means invasive shrubs and vines. Once you get a lot of sunlight, that's kind of the deal. So it may be worth thinking about how we want to sort of shape the more longer term future of what that area looks like. And my just initial suggestion, which has come up before, would be one thing we could do is something sort of educational and experimental, is just put up a deer exclosure in a couple of different areas, maybe in one of the natural one of the more natural areas and one of the open areas, so that we get some sense of how much deer browse is affecting it, how much, that historic clearing is affecting it. And we can start to see, what's still there coming back.
Are you thinking of a deer exclosure, which is basically a fenced-in island with deer fence to keep the deer out of the of a small area? Are you thinking of that as something that's hidden away from sight, or are you thinking about it in one with a sign on it, as a kind of instructional, experiment in progress?
I think ideally you do both. Have one in the open area, which you could sort of advertise gently, but just let people know, this is what this is and why
What's
it's here.
happening here? Yep.
And then maybe put one a little bit off the beaten track somewhere and be able to collect some information about what the sort of underlying forest regeneration is in both of those two areas, the degree to which it's being affected by deer or not. I mean, I'm sure that it is being heavily affected by deer, but it would be interesting to have some basis for decisions that we make going forward, rather than just sort of say, gee, we'd like some of this, or, we like hollies, so we'll let those grow and not other things, or I don't know, just to have a little bit more of a backup for whatever plans we pursue.
Carol, how long would the exclosure be up before you would have information to work with?
Well, I think in one growing season, you'd have some, and then in a couple of growing seasons, you'd have quite a bit. I mean, I don't know how many of you visit Simmons Mill regularly, but there's the old field by the parking area on John Dyer Road for Simmons Mill management area. And that's been not mowed in, I don't know how long, maybe 4 or 5 years now, but it's really interesting to see how much of the trees that are starting to grow in that field are red maples, how many of them are sumacs, what's coming in and where. And that's an area that, although it's been maintained in an open fashion for a long time, is sort of in an enclosed forest. There's a lot of forest in the surrounding area. It definitely wants to be forest if you don't mow it. So it's surprisingly not bringing in a lot of invasives. I think partly just the soil quality, but those are the kinds of questions before you make a decision, we're going to stop cutting or we're going to favor this or do that. You might want to have a better understanding of the dynamics that are actually going on currently in the situation we're working in to make good choices.
I think it's a really interesting idea. And how can we do it in the most scientific way? Grid it off? How do we, if we're going to do it, how do you do it right?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to do, but the simplicity of it would also make it a great student project or internship project or Eagle Scout project, maybe. I mean, I think it's a kind of thing, we could do it as volunteers, but I think it's also something you could put out there in the community and say, is there someone who would be hot to follow up on this? And, could we get a student from either town or, one of the internship programs at one of the universities that sort of filled this slot every year to go and count what's growing.
And we would try and photograph it in the beginning when we did it, and maybe even census it. Within it, there are, 25 clethras coming up. There's, et cetera, et cetera. So we really can see if there's a difference happening. And
right.
Would we compare it to a plot right next to it of similar size to see, see if we're looking at deer?
The classic, the sort of standard setup, and this would be a great project for a high school student or an undergraduate student if they were interested in plant ID or wanted to learn, would be to do a before-after control and impacted experiment design. So you have something that's in the cleared area, something that's in the the more natural area, something that's in an exclosure, and something that's not. So you're actually comparing all these different variables over a few years. So, this one gets eaten by deer in a cleared area, this one is prevented from being eaten by deer in a cleared area. This one is eaten by deer in a natural area. This one is prevented from being eaten by deer in a natural area.
Yep.
So you'd have to build 2 exclosures, take some photographs, set them up so that there's a standard way of assessing what's growing in there at a certain point in the growing season each year. It would actually be a very straightforward but interesting project for a student, I think.
Oh, that would be good.
How big would the area be for the exclosure?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's not a new idea. So I'm sure with a little bit of research, we could come up with a recommended. I don't think it would need to be that large. You know, I'm thinking maybe, 6 feet by 8 feet or something like that. Like, I don't think it would need to be huge, but you'd want it to be large enough to capture sort of a snapshot of diversity.
My sense is we might be able to make it bigger, but I think it would be great if we could find somebody who is willing to undertake it, really follow it up. Because when I go in there, I don't see oak trees coming up and so on. I think the deer browse is so, we're not going to have trees in there because there's so many deer. So
I strongly suspect that's the case, but it would be
Yeah.
interesting to have
Yeah.
a little bit more information to
yeah,
base those decisions on. And because the area has been opened and because it's out of bounds for hunting, I mean, the deer aren't stupid. It's amazing. If you go early in the morning, they're like, this is where we hang out. This is totally safe here.
Yeah.
We'll just move over to the other side as your dog runs by and then we'll come back. They figure it out.
When I was a kid, there were lots of swamp azaleas in there everywhere. It was super common. Now there are only a few old plants that the deer can't reach and so on. But, maybe if they're still there, they can drop seed and we could maybe get it going again. But how?
From experiments like this done in other places too, it can be incredible, the seed source that's still in the soil. So if you just take some of the pressure off, whether it's deer or management or removing invasives, what wants to be there is still in the seed bed.
Would anybody like to work on this project? Anybody in our committee trying to figure out how to make this happen? I'd be very happy to do it, but we'd have to get some coaching from Carol, I think. Anybody else?
Well, Carol, can you use, we use it around the garden sometimes on the farm because the deer are everywhere there. It's a very light material. It's like the deer sense it. Ricky Peckham described it as they think it's like a spider web or something. They back right away from it. It doesn't have to be some huge rugged thing that will keep the deer from physically crossing the barrier. It's just something to intimidate them, to keep them out. Is that the kind of exclosure you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything specific in mind. And to be honest, this isn't something, I conceptually, I've seen it done and understand the process, but I haven't built a deer exclosure or bothered to look into exactly what, the best technique might be. My only concern with something light like that is you could end up with birds or other wildlife being tangled if it wasn't a place like a farm, you're out there every day or you're kind of in the area. So I don't know if that's something that we'd have to consider. But I really think, again, I don't have the capacity to take a full lead on this. I'm happy to advise or coach or look over things, but I really think if you found the right student or volunteer who is interested, part of the interest would be in looking at what the different options are, looking at how big it needs to be, looking at what had been done, in other places. I think it would be a very straightforward, review of existing research.
I think it's I don't think it's a new thing.
No,
I
not
think
at
the biggest problem is branches falling on the mesh. So somebody every once in a while has to just, keep an eye on it to just make sure that the fence isn't knocked down, defeating the purpose of it. But but I think there's plenty of deer meshes out there, and I think we could probably zip tie them to the trees so that we wouldn't have to drill into the trees and damage them. So if somebody has to go every 5 years to make sure the zip ties aren't too tight, but I don't think it's that big a. All right, well,
It's fairly inexpensive too. It's not expensive to do it. And I know it keeps my chickens and the deer out of my gardens, so.
yeah, I think we can, yeah, I don't think we even have to tap our mystery fund. So I think we can find.
There you go.
Sue Terrell has her hand up, but you're on mute, Sue.
You're muted.
I really like the idea of a student getting involved, whether it's high school or college. And I was just thinking how Portsmouth High, the kids are probably still required to do senior projects. I think this could be a really cool senior project idea. And it's always nice to, if it's a little Compton student going to school in Portsmouth, having their Little Compton project, or even a Portsmouth student coming to Little Compton for a project. So the senior project kind of popped into my head. So.
And I would think we could work with, a couple of us could work with that kid or two, one of those kids.
And I think as part of the project, you do need like some kind of mentor or like specialist that you're working with. So yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
How do we contact the school properly? How do we find a science teacher probably? Any ideas?
I would be happy to try that, to reach out. It could even be like the guidance department, or there's probably certain teachers who are senior project advisors. I could look into it if you want me to.
That would be great.
Okay.
I'll volunteer to help with the project as it gets going, but I'll also volunteer to try to track down John Carter and ask him about that fund.
Brett would like to say something.
Okay, Brett.
Yeah, I was just going. Excuse me. I was just going to say we have we have a liaison to the Portsmouth High School on our school committee, and that might be a very good person to follow up with and provide that entry point.
Brett, could you do that? Could you check into that and then follow up with Sue?
Sure.
Well, is Polly the liaison? Do we know?
I think Polly's still the liaison.
All right. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to Polly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Good. Is there any other, I'd like to set up a meeting. Why don't we set up a meeting date for the next meeting? If the bids are going to open on, when do we, Carol, say?
February 4th.
February 4th. How about meeting on Tuesday, the 9th of February next, or is that too far off?
I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the 9th.
Is that your motion, John?
Well, I wanted to still have a discussion. I think maybe isn't it hard for people to get it at 4 o'clock? Isn't 5 o'clock better?
4 is good.
Okay. And Paul, you made it, so.
Well,
okay.
yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
Luckily, my phone was charged, and I came and hid in my wife's office over in Westport because I was flying by. I said, well, I'll just run into there.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. We meet on the 9th of February at 4 p.m. on Zoom. One day we will even be able to do it in person. Anybody second the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with that?
No.
Otherwise, the ayes have it. Let me go back. Is there any other item that we to discuss, not on the agenda, but anything like a critical element like flooding, etc.? Well, thank everybody for a good meeting, and I guess we're adjourning the meeting.
Merry Christmas,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas, yes.
Merry
And a Happy New
Hope
Year.